The sharp sound of ballet slippers against the floor echoed through the rehearsal hall like a ritual. Davi, 27 years old, lead dancer of the contemporary dance company Corpo Immerso, marked the steps with surgical precision. Sweat ran down his neck, gluing his dark hair to his skin. Outside, the city boiled in the suffocating twilight. Inside, only the metronome's repetitive click broke the silence between movements. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until the world stopped. In a flash, Davi felt a jolt inside him, as if the ground had disappeared. The air turned thin, clawing at his throat, and his vision blurred. His legs gave way. He collapsed. But it wasn't just a faint. It was a scene, vivid, brutal, undeniable. He was on the main stage of the Nobrega Theatre, during the much-anticipated premiere of the new piece Ruptura. The lights exploded above his head. A spotlight fell in slow motion, spinning in the air like a harbinger of death. The audience screamed, but the sounds came muffled, distant, as if echoing underwater. The stage structure groaned, trembled, and then, collapsed. People ran, crushed against the exits. A beam tore through the red velvet curtain, ripping it like flesh. And among the rubble, bodies. Many. Including his. Davi gasped, snapping his eyes open. He was lying on the studio floor, surrounded by frightened colleagues. One of them was calling his name repeatedly, but all he could hear was the echo of the collapse. The smell of dust. The metallic taste of blood still lingering in his mouth. The premiere, it can't happen, he muttered, trembling, trying to stand. The theater is going to fall. We're going to die there. No one understood. A few laughed, nervously. The choreographer, clearly worried, told him to rest. But something inside Davi screamed, with an unshakable certainty. What he saw was not imagination. It was a warning. And the clock on the wall, for the first time, seemed to have stopped. The decision to cancel the premiere was met with disbelief, frustration, and veiled contempt. Davi had to lie. He claimed technical flaws in the set design, structural instability, and concerns with lighting safety. The choreographer, Marina Tells, reluctantly accepted. No one else knew the truth. Not yet. For the next few days, the company dissolved into restlessness. They practiced half-heartedly in smaller groups, waiting for updates. Davi tried to ignore the glances cast in his direction, but the weight of the vision clung to his spine like frost. He knew something had been prevented, at least for now. Then the collapse happened. 3 days after what would have been the opening night, news broke. Part of the ceiling of the Teatro Nobrega caved in during a school choir rehearsal. It was early morning. 2 stagehands were injured. 1 music teacher was hospitalized in serious condition. No fatalities, this time. The media spun the story fast. Negligence, they said. A small structural failure. But to Davi, it was a thunderclap. The same beam from his vision had fallen. The same spotlight had snapped loose. It had begun. Some of his colleagues saw the coincidence. Others didn't care. But a few, those who had felt the tremor in Davi's voice when he begged to cancel, began to suspect. Among them was Luna, 24, a quiet lighting assistant with a skeptical mind and a habit of chewing her lip when thinking. There was Bruno, 30, a muscular soloist with ego to spare, and Isadora, 33, second choreographer and Marina's longtime assistant. Each had been in the room when Davi collapsed. And each now faced something they couldn't explain. "I think you knew," Luna whispered to him 2 nights later, as they walked past the empty theater. "About the accident. Before it happened." Davi hesitated. "I saw it. During the rehearsal. I don't know how, but I saw it." She looked at him, expecting a punchline. None came. "Okay, let's say I believe you. Why us? Why that day?" "I don't know," he said, voice hollow. But it wasn't just the collapse. There were bodies. Luna paled. The tension grew like static. The company resumed rehearsals at a secondary studio downtown, far from the damaged theater. A sense of survival fluttered in the background. But then came the music. It started on a Thursday. Davi was alone, warming up at the end of the hallway near Studio B, when a melody floated in from somewhere nearby. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably from Ruptura, the piece they never performed. Strings, soft at first, then growing heavier, discordant. He froze. He followed the sound down the hallway, past locked dressing rooms and a stack of folded curtains. It led him to the small stage behind Studio A, unused, dark, with its lights off. The music stopped. He stepped closer. Silence. Nothing moved. But the air felt different here, denser. Charged. That night, he didn't sleep. The next morning, tragedy returned. Eduardo, the stage technician, was found dead in his apartment. The official report cited a freak electrical accident. His sound system exploded while he was rewiring speakers for the postponed performance. Investigators claimed faulty wiring. Davi saw something else. Eduardo had been one of the first to hear him talk about the collapse. One of the few to laugh nervously and shrug it off. He's the first, Davi whispered to Luna, shaking. He was meant to die in the theater. And death is catching up. That's not how the world works, Luna replied, though her tone betrayed uncertainty. People don't die in a sequence like some cosmic schedule. Don't they? Davi said, eyes unfocused. What if it does? What if death doesn't forgive when we interrupt its rhythm? A silence settled between them. Neither wanted to say it. But something had begun. And now, it was coming for them all. The morning light slipped through the cracks of the old rehearsal studio, casting long shadows on the worn wooden floor. Davi sat alone in a corner, nursing a bitter coffee, the bitter taste matching the dread knotting his stomach. The weight of Eduardo's death hung in the air like a suffocating fog, thick and relentless. His vision hadn't lied. Death was no longer a distant threat, it was stalking them, precise and cruel. The company gathered reluctantly for a meeting. Marina's face was pale, her voice a fragile thread of authority as she tried to steady the group. Luna, usually composed, now bit her nails nervously. Bruno paced, fists clenched, his bravado fading. The tragic news had shattered the fragile bubble of denial. It was an accident, Bruno insisted, his voice harsh. There's no curse, no premonition. Just bad luck. Luna shook her head. The timing is too precise, Bruno. Eduardo was the first one to question Davi's warnings. He died days after the collapse. This isn't coincidence. Davi swallowed hard. I keep hearing the music, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. The one no one else can hear. It's like it's calling them, calling us. Days later, the first real test of fate unfolded. Isadora, the second choreographer, was running late for rehearsal. She hurried down the narrow street that led to the studio, her mind racing over choreography notes. As she crossed the intersection, the traffic light flickered from green to red faster than usual. A delivery truck rounded the corner at speed. Time slowed for Davi, who watched from the studio window. Isadora stepped into the street, hesitating for a fraction too long. The truck's horn blared, shrill and urgent. The light turned red, but the driver couldn't stop in time. The collision was brutal but silent in Davi's memory. No screeching brakes. No shouting. Just a sudden, heavy thud. Isadora was gone. Emergency responders arrived minutes later, but the scene was eerily calm. Witnesses claimed the truck had a mechanical failure, a stuck accelerator. But to Davi, it was another piece in a chilling puzzle. Another one, he whispered to Luna, voice trembling. She placed a steady hand on his shoulder. We have to find a way to break this. Bruno, however, refused to accept it. This is madness, he snapped. We're falling apart because of fear. We need to move on. But Davi couldn't shake the feeling that death was choreographing their every move, a relentless partner in a deadly ballet. The music was growing louder, inside his head, in empty halls, in silence. And the clock ticked on. The studio felt heavier than usual. Shadows stretched along the walls, swallowing the light of the solitary lamp that flickered above the cluttered table. Scattered around were torn pages from newspapers, hastily scribbled notes, and printed photographs of the company members, Eduardo, Isadora, Bruno, each marked with dates and crossed lines. Davi's eyes burned with exhaustion and desperation, his fingers trembling slightly as they traced invisible connections between the tragedies. Luna hovered beside him, biting her lower lip. Her usual calm demeanor was fraying. Look at this, she said softly, pointing at a chain of dates. The accidents aren't random. They follow your vision, the collapse, then Eduardo's death, and Isadora's accident. And it's not slowing down, if anything, it's speeding up. Davi nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Every death is a step in a pattern, like the choreography of a ballet we interrupted by canceling the premiere. Death is demanding the dance be finished, and it's coming for the rest of us, one by one. Across the room, Bruno leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, his jaw clenched. His usual bravado was cracking under the weight of reality. I'm telling you, this is just fear talking, he muttered. There's no cosmic punishment or deadly dance. It's just a series of unfortunate accidents, nothing more. But Davi's gaze was unwavering, his voice steady despite the fear simmering beneath. It's more than luck or coincidence. It's a rhythm, an unstoppable force. We tried to stop it by canceling the show, but that only seems to have triggered it. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Luna's eyes darted nervously toward the empty corner of the room. I keep hearing it, she whispered, voice shaking. That haunting music you said you hear. It's like it's calling us, pulling us towards something dark. The others exchanged uneasy glances, the room filled with an unspoken dread. The music was their curse, an invisible countdown ticking relentlessly in their ears. Later that day, the company gathered for what was supposed to be a cautious rehearsal. But the atmosphere was charged with tension, far from the creative energy they once shared. Smiles were forced, laughter rare and hollow. Every movement was heavy with the weight of fear, and every glance seemed to search for invisible threats. Davi watched Bruno closely, noting the way his friend avoided eye contact, his usual cocky grin replaced by a strained mask of defiance. Drawing him aside, Davi lowered his voice. Bruno. I'm warning you. You're next. Bruno scoffed, though his eyes flickered with unease. You sound like a broken record. Ghost stories and superstition won't save us. I'm not afraid of your visions. But fate was already weaving its cruel design. That night, a storm raged outside. Rain pounded the pavement like a relentless drum, wind howling through the narrow streets. Bruno drove home, the road slick and treacherous. Davi's warnings echoed in his mind, but he pushed them aside, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled tension. Suddenly, his car skidded on a patch of unseen oil. The tires lost traction, and the vehicle careened toward the guardrail. Panic surged as he slammed on the brakes, only to realize they weren't responding. The car crashed violently, rolling several times before finally coming to rest upside down in a ditch. Emergency sirens wailed through the storm as Davi arrived at the chaotic scene, heart pounding. Bruno was alive but barely conscious, bruised and battered, miraculously spared but hanging by a fragile thread. The doctors called it a miracle, but Davi saw it as another cruel step in the dance of death they were trapped in. Back at the studio, Luna's voice trembled as she spoke to Davi in a quiet, desperate tone. We're caught in this cycle. I don't know if there's a way out. Davi clenched his fists, the burning determination in his eyes refusing to dim. We have to find a way to break the rhythm, he said firmly. Even if it means risking everything, our sanity, our lives. We can't just wait to be next. The haunting music seemed to seep from the shadows themselves, a cold melody threading through the silence. The clock ticked on, relentless, as the dance continued, and the next step drew nearer. The air in the studio was thick with dread, almost suffocating. Davi, Luna, and the remaining members of the company gathered around the battered table, their faces pale and eyes hollow from sleepless nights and mounting fear. The once vibrant space, filled with music and movement, now echoed only with whispered worries and the occasional nervous glance toward the darkened corners where shadows seemed to pulse. We have to find something, Davi said, voice hoarse but urgent. There has to be a pattern beyond the accidents. Something we're missing. Luna nodded, scrolling through her laptop with trembling fingers. I've been searching archives, news reports, even obscure forums. There are stories, old, forgotten tragedies in theaters around the world. Collapses, mysterious deaths, all with eerie similarities. Bruno sat silently, eyes fixed on the cracked floor, his skepticism eroding. Are you saying this, curse or whatever it is, has happened before? That we're part of a long chain. Davi's jaw tightened. Exactly. It's like a vicious cycle replaying, and we're stuck in the middle. The room fell silent as the weight of that realization sank in. The haunting melody Davi heard played faintly in his mind, an invisible soundtrack marking their inevitable fate. Desperation drove them to try anything. They tested theories, switching roles, changing rehearsal schedules, even avoiding certain rooms. For brief moments, it seemed the cycle faltered. Luna's whispered relief was quickly crushed when another accident struck. It was Isadora who fell first, tripping over a misplaced prop during rehearsal. The fall seemed minor but triggered a fatal sequence. A heavy set piece toppled, pinning her before anyone could react. The company was shattered, tears mixed with panic as the grim truth solidified, death's rhythm was relentless. No, Davi whispered, voice breaking. It's not just accidents. It's a pattern of inevitability. Bruno, now visibly shaken, struggled to hold on to hope. There has to be a way out. We can break it. But as the days passed, the panic grew. The company's once tight-knit bonds frayed under fear and suspicion. Whispers filled the halls, who would be next? Could they cheat fate? One night, alone in the studio, Davi heard the music again, soft, haunting, almost seductive. He followed it to the empty stage, where a single spotlight flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows. The silence pressed in, broken only by that chilling melody. His heart pounded. He wasn't just hearing music. He was hearing the call of death itself. And the race against time was far from over. The theater felt colder now, as if the very walls held their breath. Only two remained, Davi and Luna. The others were lost, victims of a cruel, invisible dance they could neither control nor escape. The silence between them was heavy, weighed down by grief, fear, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they could outrun what hunted them. Davi stared at the scattered notes, the maps, and the hastily drawn timelines that marked every death with chilling precision. We're out of time, he murmured. The pattern's clear. Luna, you're next. Luna's eyes widened, the flicker of defiance battling despair. Then we fight. We refuse to be puppets in this deadly ballet. Together, they devised a desperate plan. If death demanded a sequence, they would try to rewrite the choreography, confuse it, break the rhythm. They would swap places, avoid rehearsals, stay away from the stage. Every move was calculated, every breath measured. But the theater was no longer their sanctuary. It was a trap. The air thrummed with an eerie energy, the faint strains of the ghostly music always present, lurking just beyond hearing. Days passed, marked by exhaustion and endless waiting. Each sunrise brought new dread, each sunset deeper shadows. Davy and Luna clung to each other's resolve, knowing the end was near. One night, as they hid in the dressing room, the lights flickered violently. A sudden crash echoed from the stage. Heartbeats thundered in the silence. Davy grabbed Luna's hand. "Whatever happens, don't look back." The minutes stretched, frozen in tense anticipation. Then, nothing. Only silence. They survived the night. For now. But Davy knew this fragile peace was temporary. The dance was not over. As dawn broke, Davy stepped outside, the cold morning air biting his skin. He glanced back at the theater, its dark silhouette looming. A final chill ran down his spine. Not from the cold, but from the certainty that death was patient. And it was still waiting for its last step. Months had passed. The city moved on, bustling with life and indifferent to the shadows that haunted Davy's mind. He had tried to rebuild, relocating to a quieter neighborhood, finding small jobs teaching dance, and avoiding any mention of the theater or the company. But the memories clung to him like a second skin, impossible to shed. The faint music still played, soft, almost imperceptible. No one else could hear it, but Davy did. It was a ghostly whisper, threading through the silence of his empty apartment, curling around his thoughts in the dead of night. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky bruised with twilight, Davy walked home along the deserted streets. The air smelled faintly of dust and rain, a scent that stirred something deep inside him, an echo of the past. He paused near a street lamp, its flickering light casting elongated shadows. The city was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and a solitary, muffled sound, a faint melody, like a lullaby sung just out of reach. Davy shivered, the familiar unease crawling up his spine. He reached into his pocket for his phone, but it slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the pavement. As he bent down to pick it up, a sudden sharp sound cracked through the air, like a brittle branch snapping underfoot. He froze. Behind him, the silence deepened. A single, muted scream pierced the night. Then, nothing. The world held its breath. The fate he had tried so desperately to escape had found him once more. Death, patient and cruel, had completed its cycle. And in the stillness that followed, the only sound was the faint echo of that haunting melody, the rhythm of the fall.